Welcome to Wrestling with Story recap. What happened? It's the Raw for July 22nd. Monday Night Raw, WWE. My name is Joshua Hale Fialkov. I'm a writer and producer of television, animation, video games, graphic novels. And I love wrestling. And I love talking about wrestling. And that's why you're here. Because I talk about wrestling. I hope. Or maybe not. Maybe you're here for other reasons that I don't understand. I wonder what they could be. Curious. So, let's go over tonight's episode of Raw. I gotta say, tonight's Raw was fantastic. I don't want to, not to diverge too much, but I ended up not doing a recap of Smackdown for a couple reasons. One was I didn't feel great, so I just didn't really have it in me. But part of that was also because it just was not a great episode. It was really flat, and there wasn't a lot going on, so there wasn't really a lot to talk about. And I gotta say, like, SmackDown in general, like, the ethos of SmackDown seems to be do a bunch of nothing, but end really strong. Usually it's open really strong and end really strong. And, I've talked before about how, like, this mentality is something that works in a lot of ways, right? Like, because what we remember as an audience is always the beginning and the ending. So this works, right? Like, it's definitely like a mentality, and it's definitely like a method that we can use. Is it a way to actually, like, live and work? I don't know. It's not for me. Not when you're expecting somebody to sit there for that long. Raw generally tends to be a lot better about it, right? Like, Raw tends to have a lot more content overall. And tonight was certainly, like, an example of that. Like, there was just a lot going on. They had a lot. It felt, for being 3 hours long, like, it tends to have a lot more happening and a lot more going on. And tonight was a really solid episode. Really enjoyed it. So let's start at the top. We'll work our way through it. It opens with Gunther calling out Priest. And Gunther cut a nasty promo, and the audience was just hating him. And it's just a reminder of, like, man, that guy's good. Like, he's, again, not to... I think we've talked a lot. I've talked a lot about how when they go to Netflix, you're going to give an opportunity to all these guys who don't have English as a first language to really... start to just, like, rip their amazing promos. But then you have a guy like Gunther, who English is not his first language, and he just rips his promos, man. Like, those promos are great. And I think there's something to the fact that English isn't his first language that makes the promos even better. Because there's something, he's so precise with the language that he chooses and how he tears into us as an audience and as his opponents. Like, he just tears in such a fleshy, meaningful way. And so he calls out Priest with some, like, legitimate, fair criticism. Like, really, I'm going to take my glasses off. With some, like, really legitimate, fair criticisms of how Priest has handled being a champion. And it's all stuff that, like, the audience has said. And yet, when it's coming out of that mouth, people just go berserk. Like, the audience was just not having it. And when Priest came out, he came out, like, ready to cut a promo with a mic in his hand, and then he threw that mic down and he just tackled him. And I think for the first time, like, maybe this is unfair, but for the first time, Priest felt like a champion, and he felt like a face. Like, he felt like a full-on face. Like, I think all it took to really get Priest over was actually giving him a proper heel to work against. And Priest didn't have to talk. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to come out and look like a badass. And man, did he look like a badass. So it was a great, solid segment. We came back from commercial, and they were still brawling. They were just still going at it backstage. It took, a ton of people to break them up. It was just absolutely really fantastic. So impressed at how much more heat this segment had. The one thing I will say, and this is not, maybe neither here nor there, I did some videos this week. I did a video this weekend about AEW's amazing episode of Dynamite last week, and how that relates to, there was some rumors that the Warner Brothers Discovery deal has closed over the weekend. And I talked about how, having that amazing episode of Dynamite certainly probably helped. And one of the things that came up from a bunch of people was like, it wasn't that amazing because the story between MJF and Will Ospreay wasn't even a story, it was just a match. If you look at that match and you look at that story that they told to get to that match, it's essentially identical to the story that we've been telling to get us to SummerSlam between the two of them. It's sort of weird, actually, how similar they are. With the only difference being that Gunther won the King of the Ring. But the thing is like everything else that's gone on with Priest that's gotten Priest to where he is right now has no impact whatsoever on the story that he's having with Priest, right? Or with Gunther, rather, I'm sorry. And Gunther essentially has just been like biding his time waiting. MJF, meanwhile, shows up. His first promo back was talking trash about Will Ospreay. Then we had multiple weeks where he was going after, like, we think he's going after Danny Garcia, but in fact, what he was really doing was setting up Will Ospreay, right? So it's more or less the same story. Like, he's really just breaking down Will Ospreay leading up to the title shot so that he can take away the championship. They're very, very similar stories, with almost the same amount of build time. Yet, nobody's complaining about the story time that it takes to tell this story in the WWE. Everybody's complaining about the story time that it takes to tell it in AEW. It's an interesting double standard. It's all I wanted to point out and talk about. We come out of that segment into yet another Ilja Dragunov Bron Breakker match. This one is to be number one contender for the Intercontinental. See, now I got AEW on the brain. Intercontinental title of Sami Zayn. What's interesting about this match is now we have seen Bron Breakker and Ilja Dragunov a lot. And I don't know what we get out of these matches anymore. It's a little problematic for me. These matches should be building up both guys is the problem, right? We've already built up Bron Breakker. We know Bron Breakker's a beast. We don't really need him built up anymore. So that means that the purpose of the match should be to build up Ilja Dragunov. And to be fair, like, this match did a pretty good job doing that. It was a good match. It was a well-fought, sizable match. But then Bron just destroys him. He just absolutely wrecks him to the point where, like, the match is just shut down because Ilja can't compete. So any amount of work done to build Ilja up is essentially erased by the end of the match. So what do we really accomplish? Like, we're kind of in the same place we were, except Ilja is now worse off. He looks worse. So to me, like, it doesn't really help Bron because Bron's already where he was. It hurts Ilja. It doesn't really help the feud with Sami. It doesn't do much of anything. It was a decent match. That's pretty much what we got. But from a story standpoint, there wasn't really a lot going on. Coming out of that, we got a backstage segment with Dom Mysterio and the rest of the Judgment Day. And, this was a great segment where essentially you have Finn, Balor sort of like pushing Dom to go after Jey Uso. You have Rhea Ripley telling everybody, like, just shut up and everybody, like, know your role and stay on target. And it's a great, like, you're seeing the, like, insecurity of Dom and you're seeing the, like, instability going on inside the Judgment Day, and you're also starting to see how Finn is manipulating everybody. So, like, this is really great character stuff that's also setting plot in motion for the rest of the night. So just really good storytelling going on, and just great performances from everybody. And like, it's doing this thing, and I have at least empathy for Dom, which I think is like a neat trick, because everybody hates Dom. You know, like nobody feels good about Dom whatsoever. So yeah, just a really good, solid segment. Then we cut from there. We see Drew McIntyre, and we learn that he is in the back because he has been, quote unquote, unsuspended. Which, again, I gotta say, Adam Pearce, you are not great at your job, because that guy was suspended and then unsuspended and then resuspended and then unsuspended, and now apparently everything is fine again. Which does not seem like much punishment has really been doled out against him. And then we get a quick segment of Xavier Woods eating cake with the Alpha Academy. Sure. Setting up that they're going to have a match later with the Final Testament, which we'll get to in a little bit. Then we have a match between Lyra Valkyria and Sonia Deville. This feud feels really rudderless for me. They do something later on to fix it, which we'll come back to. But this feud still feels a little bit rudderless. Like, part of it is there's not a good mouthpiece on the Lyra side. They haven't let Lyra talk. You have Chase and Carter, who don't really talk. And, Sonya Deville and Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler, there's a sort of flatness to them. Like, they're not... Part of it's because they're doing this, like, shoot angle, right? Like, they're shooters, and they're serious, and, like, they're not here to play. They're here to be serious. And we're very serious. It's very serious. Serious. And so because of that, it's not fun. And that's problematic, right? Like, we need it to be fun. Because, I don't know if you know this about wrestling, but wrestling should be fun. At the end of the day, I gotta tell you, I think Lyra loses. It sort of doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure Lyra loses, and Sonya Deville wins because of interference. Up next, there's been another Wyatt 6 tape that was delivered to Pat McAfee on his show, and so we get to see it. I gotta be honest, this is the disappointing one. This is Abby the Witch, which has been one of the more, expected ones, and instead of doing any sort of like behind the scenes or like backstory or really sort of like going into her real life story, all we got was like spooky. And, I think Nikki Cross has a really interesting backstory. I know that she's dealt with a lot of like, From what I know about her story, I think like there was some she had an eating disorder. She had some public bullying. There was all sorts of stuff that I think they could have really done something really interesting and really honest with, and actually made like a video about something very similar to what they did with Eric Rowan. And instead it was just sort of like monster faces. It was like Terrifier. And I like Terrifier, I guess. I'm into that. But they've sort of set a standard now that they're doing these things that are a little more sophisticated, and this was not that. It was really good looking, it was really well edited, but I'm looking for more than that from these, personally. So that was a pretty big disappointment for me. Coming out of that, we got the segment that I think everybody was waiting for, which was CM Punk announcing that he is cleared, and announcing that he is ready for a fight, and calling out Drew McIntyre. And Drew McIntyre comes out ready for a fight, and then says he's not willing to fight because he has been told that he is going to get something better than a fight here in Green Bay, because Green Bay is not all right for fighting. Especially now that is no longer the theme on Collision, so they can't do that anymore on either show, on either brand. Instead, he is going to have a match with him at Summerslam, which I think we all knew was coming. We were all excited to hear it. Adam Pearce comes out and tells Drew that thanks to his misbehavior with referees, however, they haven't been able to find a referee, and luckily they did manage to find someone at the last minute, and that someone is, of course, Seth freaking Rollins. And Seth gets a gigantic pop, just like a huge pop when he comes out. And they set up that these three guys, the feud between the three of them now has a way to play out that makes a lot of sense and is actually going to be a really fun match that is going to be the first part. And I think what'll be nice is that now the three of them are in the feud. And that's going to let the feud turn into a triple threat next. And then eventually some sort of you're going to be able to have all these different combinations of the three of them and keep all three of them busy with each other, which I think is really smart. It's really good use of them. And then eventually they're going to be able to split off and you'll be able to have them so that if Seth goes to chase the title, you can do that. If Drew goes to chase the title, you can do that. If Punk goes off to chase the title, you can do that. And the feud can continue with the other two legs of the tripod. And I think that's a really smart move. We come off of that to Dom and the rest of the Judgment Day minus Rhea Ripley searching and Damian Priest. The rest of them searching for Jey Uso, and as they split up, Dominik is cornered once again by Liv Morgan and has this very, very dynamic scene with her where she's coming on to him and saying that she knows that he misses her and she misses him, and that it's not fair how he's treated by Rhea Ripley, and that she knows how he really feels, and just really nice character work, really, really good, only for them to be discovered by Finn Balor, who's like, dude, I left you alone for 10 seconds, and fantastic moment, and they run off. Really fun, really good bit. Then we cut to Sami Zayn being interviewed, talking about how he's going to have to face Braun Breaker. That gets interrupted by the sound of somebody getting beat up. They find Jey Uso getting beat up by Finn and by the rest of the Judgment Day, only for Sami to save Jey and kick the crap out of the rest of the Judgment Day, which of course leads to just a beatdown from them, and we'll get back to what it comes back to. Come out of that into Xavier Woods and the Alpha Academy versus the Final Testament. I feel bad because I'm sure the Final Testament are good guys, and I like them individually as wrestlers. I think they're all interesting, but Jesus, as a unit, they're so goddamn boring. It's just not interesting television. And they don't work. They're not a thing. I don't understand it. I don't know what they are. I don't know what they're supposed to be. I don't know why we're supposed to care. I don't care about the story with the New Day. They're just not interesting at all. It just doesn't work, and they need to not be here anymore. No good. No good. Then we come out of that. So Chad Gable comes out with the Creed brothers, who are his new gang, rebuilding and essentially offers the Alpha Academy, the old Alpha Academy, a role in the new Alpha Academy. They tell him to go to hell. And what I was excited about is I was like, oh good, they're rekindling and trying to finish this story between Otis and Chad Gable, which they never really put a period on. I think that story was one of the best stories of the year, and then it sort of got interrupted because it didn't quite get a fine point put on it because the Uncle Howdy stuff got in the way. And this really felt oh good, they're getting back to it, and it's going to be a feud again, and we're going to finish the feud. And then the Uncle Howdy stuff, Uncle Howdy and the rest of the Wyatt Six intervened. And I will say this. They intervened beautifully. Most of the gang, most of the Wyatt Six show up on the ramp. And as they're coming out from the ramp, who arrives in the ring? Who appears in the ring behind Chad Gable? But Uncle Howdy himself. And Uncle Howdy seems to be an evolution of Uncle Howdy, where he feels sort of 50% Uncle Howdy, 50% Bray Wyatt. Which is made doubly clear when he hits a Sister Abigail, which is Bray Wyatt's finisher, on Chad Gable. And let me tell you something. This audience went absolutely berserk when it happened. Like, they lost their minds. And they should, because it was an amazing moment. Like, genuinely, just a brilliant, beautiful, fantastic moment. Really impressive, really meaningful. This felt like a great application, again, to put them in the real world and to use them in a practical way. This felt like the right way to do it. So kudos, like really, really nicely done. We come back from commercial to Pete Dunne in the ring with Bronson Reed, because Bronson Reed is just the middleman in this feud for some reason. They're about to start their match when they get interrupted by Seamus, who just wrecks everybody, but specifically Pete Dunne, and just kicks the crap out of him. This feud continues to not really make sense to me. Like, I guess from a practical standpoint, it's to keep Pete Dunne from talking. Like, I don't know if Pete Dunne just can't talk, or they don't trust Pete Dunne to talk, and so therefore he's acting like a crazy person and irrational. But now Sheamus is acting like a crazy person who's irrational. And Bronson Reed is just sort of getting kicked in the head a lot, which doesn't do much for him either. So, like, while I'm happy to see what's going to be a banger of a match between Pete Dunne and Sheamus, you know, I wish that they were doing something that had a little more subtlety and a little more smarts to it than what they're actually doing. We come out of that to find Rhea Ripley coming into the Judgment Day locker room and finds them all beat to hell. She finds out that it's because Sami Zayn and Jey Uso got jumped by them, and then they turned it around and kicked the crap out of them. And then she finds out that Liv and Dom were getting it on, quote unquote, and Rhea's like, screw this, I'm done. She drags Dom out to the ring and forces Dom to call out Liv. And guys, this is the winner of the night. This promo that was cut by Dom, by Rhea, and by Liv, these like 3 little promos, were just beautiful drama. Liv essentially, you know, the real kind of top level of it is that Liv essentially says to Dom, like, listen, she doesn't treat you right. I do. I know how you feel about me. So I just want you to say those 3 little words. And Dom looks at her and he says those 3 little words, which are, I hate you. And when he says it, God bless Liv Morgan, because she sold it. It crushed her. And he just tore into her. Dom just kept going, and he went into Spanish, and he was just like, just tearing and hitting and hitting and hitting with his words. And it was vicious. Just absolutely vicious. And then it left her a wreck. And like, it was a little, her reaction was, you know, a little cartoonish. But there was like a jewel of truth. And what was nice about it is, like, as we followed her out of the arena, as she like went into the hallways and was crying, it was hard to read. Was she going to smile? Like, was she faking, or was it real? And I think that's exactly the tone you want to set, because you shouldn't know. We shouldn't be 100% sure which one she is and which one she isn't. You know? And then the segment ends with Rhea essentially licking Dom and whispering in his ear something naughty, which is weird, but that's cool. I'm into that. I'm into the idea that the two of them are, you know, supposed to be together. What I find most interesting is I really thought that they would want to split them up, and maybe they will. Like, maybe ultimately, like, that's what's going to happen at SummerSlam, is that Dom is going to realize that one of these women loves him and one of these women is abusive to him, and he's going to choose the one who loves him. But what was interesting about this bit is it, like, for me anyways, my empathy level for Liv went way up, in a way that wasn't there before, which is an interesting choice to make, like a really, really interesting choice to make. Coming out of that, we got a really good Zelina Vega promo. I don't know if you guys have been following, but Zelina Vega has been essentially championing herself online, talking about how this is her chance to get, her run in the WWE that she's always deserved. And she's right. She's super talented. She's got a great mic skills, just amazing, great mics, just amazing skills on the mic, which she showed a couple weeks ago against Liv Morgan. And she's great in the ring. She's obviously got a great look. Like, she's a beautiful, beautiful woman with just like a remarkable, like, she's remarkably photogenic. And this is like maybe neither here nor there, but she has got an amazing internet presence. Like, she has this super loyal following online, and that means a lot in this world. Like, that really does mean a lot in the world of the WWE, and it means a lot in our world outside. And so I think, like, she should be getting a push. The fact that she's little has always been a problem, but you know what? So's Rey Mysterio. And it's never been a problem with him. Like, they figured it out. And I think she has a move set that you could pretty easily adapt into a Rey Mysterio set, especially because her gimmick is that Rey Mysterio is her hero. And that the reason that she does this, the reason that she's always done this, is because of how much she loves Rey Mysterio. And the Rey Mysterio is, the influence on her and the thing that's made her want to be a wrestler. And so you just lean into that, We come out of that promo into Zelina Vega versus Zoe Stark. And this match was pretty good. This might have been the best match of the night, actually. And part of it was really selling Zelina as someone who is undersized, fighting somebody who is like a bigger, tougher opponent in Zoe Stark. And ultimately, it becomes a interference fest as Zoe's team, which is Sonya Deville and Shayna Baszler, get involved. But then we get Lyra Valkyria and Chase and Carter come out. And what happens when you see the four of them together, Chase, Carter, Valkyria, and Vega, is suddenly it's like, oh, that's a faction. That's a faction that makes sense. If I were a booking man for the WWE, if I was the booker for the WWE, I would find a way to book the four of them as the faction. And then find a fourth person to put on the Sonya Deville side and have that be the thing that have those be the two feuding factions. Because they feel better. I think having Zelina be the mouthpiece is going to go a long way to help them, because she is so much more mature on the mic than any of the other three. And she's convincing and she's powerful, and I buy her on the mic. So like that's what I would do with her. Then we get a quick little segment of Xavier Woods asking for Karrion Kross, which tells me yawning for everybody listening and not watching. Because again, I just don't care about that stuff. And it's a shame, because I like Karrion Kross. And I love Xavier Woods. Then we get Drew McIntyre complaining about Seth Rollins. And, Drew being a complainer, I think, is like a fun, never-ending little bit that's great. Then we get Alba Fire and Isla Dawn cutting a promo about how they're going to face Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill, only to get interrupted by Baszler and Stark talking about how they're like unstoppable, despite the fact that they were just stopped, which gets brought up. And again, like it's interesting, like they're really putting a lot of faith in Stark and Baszler, and I think a lot of that is because of how well Zoe Stark did in the Money in the Bank match. But again, like there's something missing. There's an element missing from the three of them. And I don't quite know what it is, but I think they definitely need another something. We come out of that into another just sizzling Gunther video package. These video packages they do for Gunther are amazing. I don't know who they're trying to convince, because I feel like everyone's pretty convinced about him, but they just keep making them, and man, they're fantastic. Like, they're just fantastic little pieces. Just about how serious he is and how important he is and how he's going to make that title important. And, you know, I believe it. And I definitely, like, he's going over. Like, he's winning that title. And if he doesn't, it'll be weird. Then we get into our last half hour. And this is my beef. If I'm going to complain about one thing, which is not like me because I complain about everything. But if I was going to complain about one thing about Raw, every episode of Raw does the same thing, which is we get to the last half hour of the show and then we spend 20 minutes or 15 minutes of that last half hour doing ring entrances. And this time our ring entrance was Jey Uso and Sami Zayn entering from, they were like in the crowd and then they came in, they were like in the hallway and then they came through the crowd and then they went through it and then we went to commercial and then they were still entering, and it just goes on and on and on, so that by the time they get in, we're through a commercial break, they're in the ring, and then the Judgment Day comes out because we're getting a Judgment Day match, right? And then it takes a few minutes for the Judgment Day to come out, and then the bell rings and we get a match between the tag team champs, which is McDonough and Finn Balor versus Jey and Sami. On paper, this should be a good match. It was fine. Considering, like, everything is skewed now because of that MJF Will Ospreay match, right? Like, that set the standard for, like, what you can do on free TV. And I think it's going to be hard to come down from that. Because, like, not that this match is ever going to be that. But Finn Balor, or Prince Devitt, for you New Japan folk, and Sami Zayn, or El Generico, for you Ring of Honor folk, could put on a hell of a match. Like, those two guys are incredible. Jey Uso and JD McDonough, a little bit less. But the four of them in a ring together, you should be able to get, like, a pretty damn good match. What we got instead was sort of like the usual spots. A lot of, like, the usual spots. We had Sami, of course, was, like, the highlight, because he always is. And Finn did his stuff, and Finn was good. But, like, there wasn't exceptional storytelling. There wasn't any spots that were shocking. There was no, like, big moving moments. And I'm not saying that every match needs to have that. But for me, I want to have at least a couple of matches on your card, especially on a 3-hour long show, that has something that moves me. Because the drama does. Like, the drama that they do does move me. Like, I was like emotional. I felt like emotionally wrenched after the Dom and Liv scene. Like, genuinely. Like, I genuinely felt it. You feel like after Uncle Howdy gives Chad Gable the Sister Abigail, you felt it. Like, you felt the, like, elation of the crowd. Like, you felt that. And that's incredible. But yeah, it was just a regular match. And, you know, maybe it's unfair to expect more. But there you go. End of the match. After Sami and Jey get the win, out of nowhere comes Bron Breakker, who lands a nasty-ass spear on Sami. And that is how we go off into the sunset for the night. Overall, it was a really good episode. I really, really enjoyed it. You know, I think, again, like, after Friday night's SmackDown, I'm getting, like, I felt a little, like, underwhelmed. And I think a lot of that is because I really thought Dynamite last week was something special. And it's hard to compete with that. Genuinely, like, I genuinely think it's hard to compete with something as special as that episode of Dynamite. And I really recommend, if you haven't, I put up a full breakdown of that episode of Dynamite, which you can find in the podcast, the previous podcast a few episodes ago. And then I actually did a video talking about if this Warner Brothers deal goes through. I think I mentioned it earlier, but if the Warner Brothers deal does go through, what it would mean for AEW, what it would mean for wrestling in general. I highly recommend you check it out. Please do me that favor. All right, that is it for me. I will see you guys next time. I'll be back on Wednesday. I live stream on Twitch and on YouTube at Wrestling with Story. Of course, if you are watching this on YouTube, you can also subscribe to the audio version at your favorite audio podcasting location. If you are listening on podcast, please like it, review it, do whatever stuff like that there is. You can follow me on social media on Instagram at Wrestling with Story. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Fialkov, and on TikTok at Josh Fialkov. If you would like to support us, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can go to thefialkov.com and go to our store. You can pick up, we have some really cool t-shirts that I designed. Every time you pick up one of those shirts, you're helping to pay us a little bit more money that will, help us to make more content and make sure that I can keep doing this for as long as I want. Every time you subscribe, every time you like, every time you share, every person you tell about what we're doing, that's just another day that I get to do this for more than just fun. So thank you guys so much for listening. This has been the Wrestling with Stories podcast. Oh, and please check out our last episode right before this is an interview with my friend FJ DeSanto, who is the writer and producer of the Transformers Battle for Cybertron animated series on Netflix. And he goes in to talk about AEW, WWE, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and his love of wrestling that dates back since he was a little kid, and what that has to do with his career in pop culture, much like me. It's a really, really great, in-depth conversation. I think you'll really enjoy it. If you're watching this video, I'm going to throw up a link to that for you, which will be right up there in the corner. I'm going to point to it, and I'm going to get it in the right corner this time, I swear. So yeah, please give that a look-see. And if you haven't listened to it, you can actually find it in the feed of the podcast as well. And that's it for now. Thank you for listening to Wrestling with Story, and wrestling forever.